proposed changes to the 2019 application and application evaluation rubric. As we discussed last month, the Office of Charter Schools has, as it concerns the charter agreement, the Office of Charter Schools has simply recommended changes to the dates in the charter agreement to reflect the upcoming 2019 charter effective date. The 2019 application timeline and process was approved by the State Board at their April meeting. There is currently at least one piece of pending legislation that would directly impact the application process. Specifically, it includes stipulations around background checks, including the completed nationwide check, the Social Security trace, known aliases, and the background certification statement. And we've discussed the proposed changes to the background checks for the past couple of months now, so I won't spend very much time on that.
What's the legislation pending?
So, Ashley, do you know the number of that bill that Senator Tillman?
522,
Is it 522?
Senate 522.
I believe that's it. And so,
Senate?
Yeah, I don't know who's behind all that.
Yeah.
Tillman's a primary sponsor.
Is it the one that Dave sent us?
Yes.
It's Senate Bill 522.
you go.
And so it includes a number of, there are a number of pieces to the bill. Much of it does not impact the application process. And so the only part that I'm specifically mentioning here is that one section.
It seems to match up well with what the proposed policy is.
It does. It does align very well. There was one piece that we are proposing in terms of the completed county checks, but aside from that, it is very well aligned. As it concerns changes to the actual application, there are a number of proposed changes for the upcoming application itself. As you know, we are transferring the application system from Apex to Epicenter. And so that kind of lends itself to changes in the way the application is submitted. I have attached here a summary of proposed changes to specific application questions and sections of the application itself. And I did email a full draft of the proposed 2019 application to this board on April 1st. Several of you have provided feedback, which is greatly appreciated. We are still awaiting the budget spreadsheet from Epicenter. They did share an example of a budget spreadsheet from another authorizer that they worked with in the past, and so I have attached that for you so that you can see a template of what we will likely have once that has been completed. We again have discussed at length the proposed changes to the criminal background check portion of the application, and I have again there the document that we're proposing to use both for the certification statement and then also that outlines the stipulations around background checks themselves. Was there any additional feedback or were there any additional questions or comments about the changes that we're proposing to the actual application itself?
I think you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And you picked up on things that are constantly being brought up here, or that we're, wish we had more, or what, those details, and those have been incorporated into the application.
Thank you.
Is this where you want comments on like the scale?
So that's the next slide.
Okay.
So this board did express a desire to move away from pass-fail ratings and towards a rubric that includes meets, does not meet, etc. And so the Office of Charter Schools looked at rubrics from a number of authorizers across the country, and we did send to you a proposed rubric for the upcoming application cycle. It includes categories of meets or exceeds, partially meets, and then does not meet. I did receive some questions and feedback on the rubric, and appreciate that input, but welcome any additional comments or questions that members of the board have for me today.
I mean, my only thing, which I've talked about before, is I'm fine with us rating meets or exceeds the standard, partially meets standard, does not meet standard. I still don't like the idea of external evaluators doing that, because one of the things I wanted us to get away from is the state board looking and saying, well, the CSAB passed this application onto us, but it was only only one external evaluator passed it and 4 failed it. And now it's going to be, well, only 2 external evaluators found that it met standard and 4 of them didn't. And so we're right back where we were. I mean, I would just as soon have the comments of the external evaluators and let the people that have been designated by the General Assembly to actually vote on these things be the ones that vote on them. That's just my preference.
That's a very sensible idea, Mr. Walker.
So are we gonna
Because
score?
you're giving them too much power. You're giving the external evaluators too much power here.
I think sometimes the state board looks more closely at the external evaluators' votes than ours. And the external evaluators, they're just people we hired to take a look at it.
And sometimes you'll see them, they vote no, there's one will vote no on everything.
Yeah.
And the rest of them may vote yes.
I would agree with you. I appreciate their comments and suggestions, but I agree that having them actually rate it can skew.
It can skew the perception of the application.
So then would this board submit ratings prior to clarification for every?
I tend to agree with that. Like, I think that it becomes, you get fixated on the pass-fail thing, and you know, I think because we haven't kind of, I think when we originally set out to do this work, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we said, okay, if it's failed by the external evaluators, this is even before y'all were on the board, we were not going to, if it failed in any section, we were not going to move it on or something like that. I think we haven't had consistency with that, so I don't think that it's adding value because there's a lot of nuance. And I think having them review it and give us the data, give them their objective opinion makes, and write it in narrative form makes good sense without having the scores. My only question is, or my only concern is, we will then not have a score unless we score. And I would say our track record has been spotty in board members, and I count myself among those that deserve criticism in scoring the applications in the last couple of rounds. So we're sometimes making comments, sometimes not, sometimes scoring all the applications, sometimes scoring some of them. So we would have to be more consistent or just not score them with a number rating. So if there's going to be a scoring system, we would have to hold ourselves accountable to scoring every section of the application in the Epicenter system.
Is that a required, as the newest person on the board, is that a requirement that we do that? Or is
Yeah, everybody's
or is
supposed
the
to.
scoring when I raise my hand and vote for it, yes or no?
I think you're supposed to do
kinda
it
said like
in your
we want,
committee, right?
yeah, like in your committee.
Before clarification, you would have gone in and reviewed and scored the application. I mean, that was the old process.
Like, you don't
Which
have
I
to
think it's still the
necessarily-
new process.
You don't necessarily have to make comments, but you got to score, which I would be fine with. Us scoring it. We just got to do it, or else we're not going to be able to. We won't have a data point. I would love that data point to say, us as a board score, because we look at this data point and it's the external evaluators and we're kind of like, eh. Whereas if it was us, I would feel really good to say, oh, we were like this application rated a 2 overall. The average score was a 2, or the average score, this was a 3. Y'all scored it. I'd feel really good about that process because it's us doing the scoring.
It has to
but we just got to do it,
It has to be done.
and everybody's got to do it.
Right. Consistency and integrity.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is a volunteer gig, so I mean, it's like, and you know, it's late at night, and you're just like click, click, click. I mean, I would just that would be my
That doesn't
concern.
help.
That would just be my concern.
I do find, I think I agree with Mr. Walker. I think the external reviewers just providing their comments and any questions that they may have, that's valuable to me. But not so much the pass, fail. I just think there's too much inconsistency in those external reviewers, how they look for things, that what's their baseline for looking at an application. I don't know.
And they all have different perspectives.
Yeah.
You know, some have started charter schools, some have worked for DPI. I mean, they have various.
I mean, I'll give a personal example. I've learned a lot just in the 3 months being on this board of how much you guys know some of these communities about, wow, this community really needs a school of choice for, you know, maybe for underserved populations and I'm learning that. And how's an external reviewer even remotely have that information available to them when they're looking at some of these things? And I know that doesn't necessarily change whether the ed plan's solid or not, but I think there's some sense of perspective of where the school might be going that an external reviewer may not even have. I may be wrong about that. I don't know.
Well, external evaluators have got a lot better than they used to be. I mean, I remember the first year of the CSAB, we had some external evaluators from New Jersey, people from all over the country, and there was this one that, I mean, she failed every section of every application. And Alan, if I remember correctly, it may have been Alan, brought a spreadsheet in to show how she had passed, I think it was 0.5% of the sections that she had looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way out of all those applications that it was, you know, that it was that they were that bad, because they weren't that bad at all. But I mean, I agree. I like the comments. They don't have a vote. We're roundabout way giving them a vote. So I would move then that that we recommend to the state board that external evaluators do not rate the application, but only provide comments
Or questions.
or questions. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll second that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
that was a motion.
okay.
I think you did say on that.
And I would agree to that. What I copy out of the application to sit and review over and again is the comment section, and then go back and do a deep dive in particular areas that they bring up too.
And I would hope with the Epicenter program coming online that it'll be easier to navigate through the application.
Yes.
Because I think that's the toughest part, at least for me, is just
Bouncing
trying
back
to
and forth.
navigate through.
The appendix and finding it, yes. I see a smile.
I mean,
It
So
better
we
be
would-
after
so
all the
based-
work we did to get that thing
so
in
based on that motion, are we saying no comments on the external no scoring by external evaluators, and we would decide if we want to score, or are we just going to remove the scoring altogether?
I think we just removed the scoring for the external evaluators.
Waiters, right.
Okay, but
That
then
we
we'll score.
would score. Yes.
I'm psyched about that. We gotta do it.
So, yes.
I mean, we gotta do it. We gotta do it. It's gonna be embarrassing if we don't score it. Like,
And
right.
say, well, only 3 people voted or scored.
Well, in the end, though, the only score that really counts
Is the vote.
is the
It's
one
the
when it's a
vote.
vote at the end. Yeah.
I know, but we're saying we're basing that vote on something.
Right.
I think there's a part of that process though too, where I wouldn't want us to get so hung up on, I reviewed this application, I scored the education plan a 2.
That's right, so we need
And
to
then,
make sure.
and then
what we're
amongst our
saying is what
discussion,
we
I
want.
realized, wow, I probably, you know, you bring up some great points that I didn't even think about. So I might rate it a 2 or a 1 and then still vote for the application. I think there's an important part of the discussion that we have that you're gonna see things that I don't see, or I'm gonna see things in the finance part of the budget that you don't see,
And
and
we do it like when we're doing the interview, we have it where everybody scores as they, we vote right then.
I just don't want us to be in a
Real
position
time.
where, you know, I failed three out of the five sections. I'm making this up, and at the end of the day, I still raise my hand and vote for it. Like, is that going to create any kind of? I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, that could, no, but that's a legit
But
concern.
that happens now,
Yeah.
It
not
does
with
happen
us,
now,
but-
because there's things
that come out.
transpire and come out in the process. One option could be to score the app at clarification. We could say, hey, I actually think this could be good. We could say by the end of the clarification interview, we have to have scored the application. So that would mean like we would have our computers and you would say, okay, let's take 5 minutes, go ahead and score each section. If there was a place, and right now we have like, there's a lot of places, well, it's kind of hard to get to the pass. You're like, okay, I got to find that pass fail is in some pages, but it's not in all the pages.
Right.
I don't know how it could be set up this way, but if it would be like, just there's one place where you can give your rating to each of the 5 sections or whatever.
You'll have
So
a Word
that-
document for each application, and it'll just be a blank rubric, and then you fill in your questions.
The other option would be if even in paper, because that could be easier. If we just had a Word paper that said the name of the school, the basic details, and then that's our scoring sheet. We all score at the end of the clarification. This is our, and then we give it to Office of Charter Schools, and you guys just input our final scores, so that then after clarification we have scored that application and we have that as a data point. That doesn't mean that we're gonna vote one way or the other, but it's, I mean, that would probably help applicants too, because they say, oh gosh, our application is only scored at a 1.5 on average. That could be easy, because then we just have it in writing.
And that's after clarification?
Yeah, so basically the committee, let's say we're the performance committee. We've discussed the application, we decide to move it forward, and we make sure we have to turn in, our final scores. And that'll be public at the, when it posts on the system, but we're not, so it's like, you either score it, you can score it in the system or
Paper.
or by paper if that's easier, so that every committee has scored the application. So you as a board member would only score the applications in your committee. You as a board member would not have to score every application.
Okay.
You would only score the ones in your committee.
Which is what we're theoretically doing right now. with the
Right, but
task
we're not
force.
really doing.
Right.
And I think
I
that,
always put it in for mine, but
we're not consistent.
no,
And-
I can tell.
but
I've
I think-
gone through and looked to see
yeah.
what other people did.
And I think it could be beneficial to like say your deadline for scoring is after the clarification interview, so that then we have that as a data point. So even if you're not here at this meeting, that application was reviewed. When we sit down to do the interview, you can pull it up in your prep and say, oh, the committee scored it a solid 3. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that likes this idea.
I like it too.
I like it.
We need to vote on my motion.
Are we gonna do a numerical rubric or
I think we should do my preference is for a
or
new,
just the meets, exceeds, whatever, 'cause that's
Yeah.
kind of subjective.
I just think I think it should be a number, because then you can get an average weight. And also it has way more nuance than pass fail, because with the state board, it's like, well, this, you might fail something because it's not quite there, but if it was if you could pick a 2, you probably would, as opposed to just a 0 or a fail. I mean, we could do a 0, 1, 2, or 3, or just
What
a
was
1,
it
2, or
we
3.
did when we first started the advisory board? It was like,
It was like meets. There were 3 categories.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm fine. I mean,
I just think it should
you
be
really,
a number.
you
Just
really
give us a
don't-
basic rubric, and we can just use a number system.
if you look at the rubric that you kind of did, whatever meets or exceeds standards, that could be 3.
Right.
Partially meets standards is 2. Does not meet standards is 1. So,
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
and worst application I've ever read can be 0.
but aren't really.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we could do that. So I amend my motion to include that we just discussed as well. So
To
I probably
include
need
what, a scoring,
a scoring on the,
By the individual committee?
by the
By the
individual.
committee.
Committees. So we will not score the applications that are not in our committee, even
Right.
when they're open,
Right.
even when they are moved forward.
Right. You won't have to. You just are going to score the ones you're assigned to in your your
Okay.
subcommittee.
Okay.
And that way it keeps the number relatively low, but the whole board has a numerical kind of like, this is the way the committee viewed this application.
Okay.
Does that
So
sound
with the,
like something you can operationalize?
with the clarification, Chair, take a poll at the end of the clarification session and find out where each member on his or her committee scored each section? Is that the way we're gonna do it? Because I haven't been in favor of this from the get-go, and I told Joe that. And as, you know, I bring certain things to the table, and it's things that I'm not as good at as you all, diving into the minutia of curriculum and so forth, but I know a whole lot more about EMOs than you all do, and can read a board better. That's what I bring to the table, but I'm, you know, I defer to the judgment of my colleagues on a lot of other issues.
Well, you would just, all you would have to do is you would have a sheet of paper, Alan, and at the end of the clarification, you would have the 5 sections, and you just give it a 1, 2, or 3. You just write it down. So we'd say, okay, if you have not scored, we're going to take 2 minutes we're going to add 3 minutes or 5 minutes to the end of each clarification and say, take 5 minutes and write down your score, hand those into the team at the end, and then those will be posted online. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the chair is going to ask for the vote. So the vote is the
Right.
vote. But this is a way to give another piece of data to the full board before we do the interview.
And I think too, that's
And
really
take the external evaluators out of it.
the appropriate time, I think, to actually put
Right.
that mark is after the clarification.
I think so too.
Because a lot of times when it's clarified, then it clicks, oh, now I understand
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
mean. Definitely I'll pass,
Right.
or I might have failed it
Bruce was
before.
very accurate in that statement, and that sometimes we are either too critical or too lenient when we're going through on our own, and then after, you know, for example, there might be someone that I've passed, and then when they stand before us, they can't explain what their ed plan is, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, so.
We've had that with core knowledge, people not being able to.
I mean, honestly, it might be easier to just say, like, and we're getting into the weeds, but I feel like we have to talk about this at some point, to just have everyone submit their sheet of paper after every committee, like, rather than score it in the system. You could just, that could just be something that the Office of Charter Schools inputs that data, so that you don't have some people that have input it beforehand and people can see it, and some people that have it. It's just after the clarification, we build in a 2-minute buffer, and we just have a sheet that has like the basic information on one side, and then on the other side, it's our score sheet. We write the score down, we turn all those into you, and then you guys put all that in, and then that way, we're also not feeling like we've got to score it before we come in. We can read the app, we can make notes in the app, but then that final score is after the clarification, when we've actually had some time to clarify, because sometimes I've had a serious question, maybe I'm going to score them. I would have scored them negatively in governance, but once we have that clarification interview, I'm like, oh, that's actually not that big of a deal. And then we can, I feel like we would get the most accurate rating after that. And then that way you're not kind of collecting from some and not collecting from others. You could just set up your system in the office to have somebody, Patricia could probably do it, just input that.
Sure.
There's the score that's being seen, the individual score, like Linda Lynn's scores, my scores, Tammy's scores, Sherry's scores, or is it our 4 scores combined for one
That's a good
score out of the
question.
committee?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm in favor of a score, an anonymous score for each section that's an average.
So it's the performance committee's
score for each
So we
section.
would need time after each clarification to powwow a little bit, and I think, and
And that's not what you're talking about.
I was just saying, no, I was just saying each person scores it individually.
Yeah.
The
They do
office
they crunch the
basically
numbers.
averages it
Averages it.
and then puts
they
it in the
crunch the number.
system.
Got it, all right, yeah.
So that the state board could say, so we would say the score, passed with a 7-4 vote. It was scored in the performance committee as a 2.8 on a scale of 1 to 3, or it, was scored as a 1.2. So it was, a weak application out of committee, but it passed, but we don't have to, because I don't like that either, that applicants can see, okay, this person failed this section, this person didn't fail this section. It's like, it's putting a lot on us to, I don't know. It would be better, I think, if it's just, this is the committee score. So then we don't have external evaluate. We don't have an individual person score. We don't have an individual board member score. We just have the committee score of this application based on an aggregate average of all of their individual ratings.
Would that count, and I guess this is more of a legal question, would that count in a way as like an official action that would need to be public, that they would need to know how each person scored?
Why do we owe
That is a
them
great question, Vice Chair Walker, one that perhaps we can talk about later today.
Okay. I mean, I'm just, I agree. I mean, I agree
Just
with
don't
what
feel like
Alex
we
is saying.
owe that
I
to
just
them.
don't want us
We
to
can.
get in any issue.
Well, I feel like we have to be able to have. I mean, it's the same reason why I think we should be able to go in a closed session after each application to make I just feel like we should be able to. I'm just saying. It's the fact that
He's
all of
advocating
these.
for some changes in the open meetings law, which I could understand.
A lot of times when the state gives grants, they don't have a public meeting about the grants that they're about to give. Anyways,
I think there's some exceptions carved out for those.
just saying.
So what is the
We need a CSAT
amended
exception.
motion?
I don't know, Alan.
The
You
amended.
tell me.
I mean, what would it be? It would be no more external evaluator scores, in that the performance committees are going to score on a 1 to 3, a proposed rating scale after each clarification interview, as set up by the Office of Charter Schools.
What about the policy committee?
Well, the policy committee.
Don't worry, you're not gonna get off the
committees,
hook.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not getting out of it.
You're not getting off the hook.
Alan, I'm doing a piece of paper for your benefit. I notice you don't have a
Phyllis, too.
computer in front of you. You and Phyllis. No, I like a piece of paper too. It's nice, simple.
Let's vote.
All right. So, do we need to amend the motion?
I amended the motion, but I think it needs to be reseconded since it was,
Okay, I
I'll
second,
second.
you
all
resecond.
right, reseconded.
All right. All in favor?
Oh.
Wait.
Well,
As long as it remains as reasonable and sensible as I understood you all to agree on, I'm gonna vote for this. But I'd kinda like to hear it again.
Okay.
Okay, so what's gonna happen, the external evaluators are no longer gonna rate the application. They're only gonna provide comments.
Anecdotal comments.
We will, as each committee, before we review for clarification purposes, have read the application, ready to ask the questions. After the clarification interview, we'll take about 5 minutes for everybody, either on paper or on the system, to grade 3 is the best, 2, then 1, on each section of the application. And then we will take an average of those ratings, and that will just get attached with it. It's not a yes or a no, it's just for a point of references. Well, this application had a little bit higher ratings than this one, and so that we can kind of say, we can kind of look at, well, this is kind of almost your application grade, but it won't change anything about how we vote on actually sending the applications forward.
And it'll make it really clear if there's one section that was weak, that the
Yeah.
policy or performance committee thought was weak, we can focus on.
Okay.
So I guess technically, I withdrew my motion and made a new motion, and it got seconded. Just didn't really get reseconded.
I'll second it for the third time.
make sure that all of that confusion is in the minutes, please.
We have it. Yep.
All right.
All right, all in favor? All right, great. Motion carries. This will be good.
So that's all I have for today. Because the application is not complete, we're unable to take a vote on the application right now. That may mean that we need to do a call at some point in the next few weeks to get that done so that it can go to state board as soon as possible.
That's fine.
Okay.
You just set it up.
That concludes.
Can we take on the amendments right now? Great.
All right, good afternoon. Let's see, we have 3 amendments we need to vote on today. And then, as you know, you will hear from Connections this afternoon, and we'll also need to make a decision about how to proceed with that amendment. The first amendment we are going to speak about is Concord Lake STEAM Academy's request to amend its mission statement. This is actually, it's Kannapolis Charter Academy. They just changed their name, so we approved the name change in the office. And we approved a curriculum change, so they are moving to a more STEAM-based curriculum, and along with that, they are changing their mission, and that's also why they changed their name to Concord Lake STEAM Academy. So their old mission statement was Kannapolis Charter Academy's mission is to create an environment where each student is challenged to reach their academic potential and become self-motivated lifelong learners through data-driven personalized learning plans, community stewardship, and positive collaboration with families. Their new mission statement that they are requesting is that Concord Lake STEAM Academy's mission is to provide scholars with a well-rounded education through rigorous, innovative, and inquiry-based instruction so that scholars think critically at higher levels, develop a strong work ethic, and are college, career, and community ready.
I move we recommend to the state board the approval of the amendment.
All right, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, the next amendment, we have spoke about Hope Charter Leadership Academy. As you know, they are relinquishing their charter at the end of the school year, and we just need to do a formal amendment to let that proceed. They are located, I believe you know, in Wake County, serving K-5, and a closure meeting has already happened with our office and the Financial Business Services office and the Board of Directors, and the last day of school will take place June 28th. And we're kind of in the process now of working on the closure with the school and the Board of Directors.
I move we recommend to the state board that they accept the relinquishment of their charter.
Could I ask a question? Ashley, why are they relinquishing their charter? Low enrollment or?
No, the board felt that they have not been able to make the academic success that they were hoping for, and just believed that it was a better decision for the children.
Thank you.
Also, this year, they were part of the renewal process, and they considered all things when entering the process, and so they just decided, just let it roll off now.
Right there.
So just, instead of going through the renewal process, let it end.
Right.
So what is the amendment?
To relinquish its charter.
The state board has to
Yeah.
agree
So we
to
did-
let them
And
terminate.
when it was brought up before, we
themselves.
didn't approve that.
No, we didn't. That was just for a articulation agreement, and we could have done it together. It just didn't happen then.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That was so that, yes.
I just want to say that I just appreciate their board in the way that they've acknowledged that they tried and for the sake of the children, they were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we often, sometimes adults, get so blindsided, I guess, that sometimes we don't do what's best for the children. And I just really appreciate their board.
Why did Cashy Hall not understand that?
Well, I think one thing about this board, this is a professional board. They've raised tons of money for the school over the years. They've invested their own personal financial stake in it. They've been giving, and I think they realize, like many boards never realize, that it's just not working out and it's time to hang it up. And they've tried really hard. They've tried a lot of different strategies, and they're confined. Their facility is too small. It's difficult for them to grow at a scale that's reasonable. And I don't think they had no you know, I think some boards, unfortunately, you get boards where there's a lot of ties between the executive director and people that are being paid, you know, and the board members. You know, that happens, and they don't want to make the hard decision to say, you know what, we're going to hang it up. But this group has, you know, given this a lot of thought, and they put a lot of energy into it, and you know, I think this is a
Sounds
really
like there's a lot of
respectable decision.
integrity and honor on
Absolutely.
that board.
So Stephen, you had a motion, we just needed a second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Motion carries.
All right, I have one more for you today. This is from Henderson Collegiate. So Henderson Collegiate is a charter school located in Vance County. They serve K through 12. It's one of our top performing charter schools. And they have, in their original charter application, they had elected to use the North Carolina Educator Effectiveness System to assess teacher performance. And they have since developed their own rubric and teacher evaluation system that they use in place of that North Carolina system, and that's what they are seeking to amend right now, is the permission to use their system that they have developed. In the materials that I've posted on eBoard, they've really given a substantial amount of information as in terms of how their system aligns with the requirements of a teacher evaluation system. So hopefully you had a chance to look at that, but it's pretty substantial in terms of the rubric they use. They do weekly one-on-one coaching. Teachers get observed several times a week. So it's pretty thorough and in-depth.
Move we approve it, or we recommend approving it.
I move that we recommend approval of it.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Great.
All right.
Amendment's done.
That is it.
Do we want to preview connections? We want to get going on
I believe
that? Okay,
it looks like lunch is here, so if we want
Great.
to.
Hey, that's
go ahead and make the motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move that, if this is at all possible, that we go into closed session to discuss with our legal counsel, attorney-client related matters, and do that as we eat. Is that, yeah, we'll do it as we eat. And so that's my motion.
I second it.
All in favor? Motion carries. We are moving to closed session. We'll be back after lunch. And our goal, let's just say that I'd like to try to pick up at 1 with NC Connections. I believe
Don't we get out
NC
of
Connections,
here?
most of your team is here? Okay, great. So 1 o'clock
So we're gonna do closed session
at
during
lunch.
lunch.
during lunch. All
Yep.
right.
Yeah, that's good, we get out early.
Yeah, we got some weather coming.
Yes,
Before
we
the
do.
bad
Yeah, it's supposed
stuff
to get
gets,
There's gonna
yeah,
be some bad storms.
Lovely.
man.
yeah.